Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Divine Feminine Healers podcast. I'm super excited to have Megan from the Zesty Ginger on the podcast. We had her other half, Dr. Alex, on a couple of months ago talking about changing habits, and I'm so excited to get your insights and wisdom today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Angelica. I am excited about this topic.
So, a question that I ask all of my guests off the bat is how do you connect with the divine feminine? Because each of us has such a unique expression, and I love seeing the way that she plays with each of us.
So, to me, our whole business is based around connecting with the divine feminine because for me, that's flow and creativity, and most of all, actually tapping into intuition.
Mm.
And what I have found over time for myself and for the people we work with is that there are blockers of intuition. There's blockers of our ability to trust ourselves, of our ability to stop reaching to other people to tell us the answer, right? So when we first started helping women in health, there was a lot of, hey, what exact supplement do I take? What do I do? And over time, we watched the people who were really good at sticking to things like that, really good at sticking to a structure, actually didn't heal as fast as people who were a little more questioning, right? What is good for them and totally tapping into intuition, a mouthful. So for me, actually clearing the beliefs that we have around our ability to trust ourselves and doing that practice daily, whichever format that is for you. But for me, subconscious reprogramming is getting me back into that intuition so that I can stop asking so many other people for the best way to go and really, really just tap into what is the best way for us? What is the best way for me and my body to decide which way to go next?
I love that so much. I agree. I find that that's a difference amongst a lot of healers in general in this space is how you can tell when a healer is really wise is when they empower you that you have all the healing or you have all the experience and wisdom that you need inside yourself. And while it can be like a quick band-aid to, let's say they give you a treatment plan or whatever it is to fix whatever you're working on in that moment, when a challenge arises, which it will because we are a human body, then we don't even have a template and then we're seeking out someone else. So sourcing the wisdom from within and power is like so aligned with everything. So I love that you spoke on that. And something that I love about your process, last time Dr. Alex kind of took us through each step-by-step process of how you can successfully build habits, a new habit. And I love your formula so much. I think it's so intuitive and a lot what people are naturally doing, but it can give them a structure so they can kind of stay within the lines. And I'm so fascinated with your first step of needing to calm the nervous system before we do anything. And this is because our whole world, if you really look at it, it's like, wow, everyone is really just living in this state of emergency. And we're seeing it all the time, whether people feel like they have to post multiple times a day or they feel like they have to like constantly do x amount of z with their marketing and their sales strategies in order to get to a certain level, and it actually is going against with the body. But how what do you for those who are feeling like they're kind of caught in that conditioning of that fight or flight mode, they don't even know what it looks like to be calm in their nervous system and in their body, do you have any kind of like markers or ways of understanding what a calm nervous system looks like?
Absolutely. And that ties so well back into the intuition, right? Because when our physical body is freaking out, when we are in fight or flight, then we won't be able to hear that intuition. We won't be able to hear that little message of this isn't good for us because we will be in actual survival brain and just focusing on what we call it as problem trance. So we get so honed in on the actual problem that is all we can see. And then that is all we can focus on. And then we maybe are the answer, like some solution might be just right next to us, just 10 inches away from us, literally right next to us. Somebody's sitting there. But when we're in what we call problem trance, we're literally hypnotized by our own problem and focused on our problem. We can't see the solution that's
Mhm.
right there. So the key is that the body is the signal up to the brain signals down to the body. It goes both ways, right? But the body, if the body itself is in fight or flight state, if we have an elevated heart rate, if we are actually thinking, our body is thinking, hey, we need to run from the bear, like it's physically changing physiologically to flee, to fight, to freeze, then we don't have our amazing creativity on board. We don't have the ability to see all these options. I'll give you an example, Angelica. Just this morning, I was driving my kids to school, dropped them off, and then the way back, I realized that the power was out for all the traffic lights where we live. And so I'm driving and I noticed that the lights are out. And so I was being really careful, really careful, really careful. Although what happens when we're driving, we're also in hypnosis or driving trance. And I got to one of the intersections and the light was out. So it wasn't green, it wasn't red, but to me, it just became a street. And instead of stopping, I was about to go straight through, and the people coming the other way were also going straight through. And I slammed on my brakes. They were on a much faster road. Like we all had a stoplight, but none of them were lit up. So no one really had, I don't know what happens there. I slammed on my brakes, just barely avoided an accident. I've never been in an accident. And this is what was a physical full body fight or flight response. So that's one extreme where I had a rush of, oh my gosh, that could have been really, really horrible. And one of the areas that we'll teach people that we work with is to make sure when there's an acute stressor like that, to then go discharge the energy right away.
Mhm.
What happens is, and I think especially when nothing actually happened, meaning there wasn't an accident. I didn't hit anybody. Nobody hit me. Everyone was physically safe. Nothing happened. Although in my body, it was as if it did happen because I saw it, the potential of it happening. I played that out in my brain and I released all the chemicals in my body as if I had just gotten in an accident. So sometimes when we have something that's really close, or even just imagining some horrific potential, we aren't aware of how much that actually physically changes the body. I mean, we are aware if we feel into it, right? Your heart is racing when you think about certain things. You're just thinking and it's causing that. So I went home and I actually got on on the grass. Like I took, got on the grass so I could get grounded, and I physically shook out my arms and my legs. I jumped around to dispel the energy. I tapped left to right, and we kind of do a cross body back and forth tapping, and using a lot of the different tools we use. I was tapping on my face back and forth to move this energy out. So if in the moment when something happens, whether it's actually something like that, where you're like, whoa, life flashing, or it's something such as an email that for you is just as threatening. Someone's asking for a refund, or someone is in your family is putting up a boundary, or something that gives you that feeling of, oh no, like someone's upset with me, or I don't know, whatever the beliefs are, we can have just as strong of a physical reaction. We want to make sure to then use those tools and until the body is fully back to neutral, until you can sit there. My test would be to sit there, look and read the email, whatever it was that triggered me, until the point that I'm having no physiological response. I can just be fully present. I can actually breathe with it and be there. And I don't have the thought, my brain doesn't jump to usually it will jump to the defense of yourself, right? Whatever it is to try to protect us, when I can just sit there. So there's this acute scenario. And then there's just the day to day. We suggest that everyone get up and just practice using parasympathetic tools. That maybe that's a deep breathing practice for you. Maybe that's EFT tapping. Maybe that's yoga. Whatever it is actually starting to prime the brain to get into parasympathetic more often than not, because it is a pathway that we can increase. It is a pathway that with time it will get easier. When we first teach in some of our groups, we teach an exercise of getting into peripheral, and we'll have people say, oh, I actually feel more anxious from that, whereas most people
Mm,
feel calmer. And we'll say, yes, when you have been constantly stressed out. So
right.
I think that's one of the parts you're asking is how will you know? How would someone even know if they were in this chronic state? Well, when you go to do an exercise that other people say are calming, like tapping or expanding your awareness into peripheral, deep breathing, if you feel worse, then that is a sign that you actually are not using the system regularly. And it's a muscle. We can build
Mm-hmm.
it, we can use it, and then hopefully you'll start to get that actual physical relaxation feeling. You'll go, oh, like I can feel the difference, like your shoulders are dropping, you're breathing into your belly, like you're just changing physically how you feel and how you are. But it's a real small shift that if you aren't tapped into your body, you
Mm-hmm.
can be in that all the time and just think that is not only normal. There are a large population of people who have figured out that that is how they get stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
So they really tie that level of stress to their productivity. And
Totally.
that's a real trick, because if then you tie productivity to your worth, which is also a common one, if we were taught early on, like, if you do a lot, you're a better person. If you do a lot, I'll give you love. If you do a lot and get good grades, you get the kudos from the teachers and the parents. Then we're in this very tricky situation of thinking, I need to be stressed out because
Mm-hmm.
therefore I will be productive and therefore I will be loved.
Totally.
So that lack of stress, that actual calm feeling, can make people very uncomfortable.
Mm. It's so interesting because it depends like how deep that trauma really has built into the system, that when it has that become your comfort zone, has that become your homeostasis, or that feels normal to you. And to get into the body can feel so uncomfortable to people that they're going to want to squirm, they're going to want to resist every emotion. It feels unsafe because we were taught in that traumatic state that it was in the past. And I've known that to be for myself. I've witnessed that of like, whoa, when you have those like kind of hyper trauma moments where your blood rushes, the adrenal glands are flushing out, and like you could feel your whole body just working to keep you alive in that moment. And just to really observe like what the body is doing, and then coming to recognize like, wow, like that is not my state of being. And I know the tools to come back to this relaxed state so that I can receive messages, so that I can be in my being, I can be in my divine feminine in that sense.
Absolutely. It's a daily practice.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll get more and more used to it. I think when you notice, or if someone listening, when they notice that once everything kind of gets to a certain state of like calm in their life, that then
Mm-hmm.
magically problems show back up, that's a chance to start looking at our belief system around that. Because if we were brought up in a very chaotic environment, then we may really have linked like chaos is love, or right, the state
Mm-hmm.
actually is the best state. And calmness will we will start to draw in some other situations and some other things. So there is definitely, just watch the patterns. We're all about patterns. That's what we do as humans. Patterns are how we understand and how we get the things that we want, is that other people follow certain patterns and strategies. So it is very telling if that is a continuous thing that keeps happening for you.
Definitely. I'm so curious with each of your steps in building a new habit and building new identities, where do you find that your clients get the most stuck in? Which step?
Well, so it's such a layering process. Let's see. Because we set goals early on in the process, I'd say that is a big sticking point. Because setting a big goal brings up all of our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It brings up any fear that we may have around actually getting the goal, or any fear we have around, like, what if I say I'm going to go for this thing and I don't get it?
Mm-hmm.
What is that going to mean about me if I go for this big goal and I don't hit it? Or if I say I want my health, or if, right, like if I write it down and it doesn't
Right.
happen, that there's just right there's some, it feels permanent, that then it's just not going to happen. So the goal week of really just setting the GPS for where you want to go and what you want, and setting it big, setting it bigger than you even really understand how you'd get there, that can bring up a lot of resistance for people. I was in that category of the I didn't dream. I didn't like to dream big. I liked to keep doing air quotes for the audio, but keep it realistic, right? It was about keeping my expectations so that I would never be disappointed.
Mm.
Well, that's one strategy. That's also not the strategy if you want to go for big things, because as you know, we now teach is like you get to go for something big. And even if you don't make that thing, maybe you don't make that thing in the timeline, and maybe you make it the next year. Or maybe you don't make that thing and you realize in the process that's not even the thing that you want. Or it opens you to even more options than if you hadn't gone for a goal at all, obviously. And there's just so much behind that goal process, and what we have kind of programmed around how we really do need to always hit the goal. And we're teaching people like, you don't have to hit the goal. You can change it. You can
Right.
move it. You can change the timeline, and you'll still have expanded as a person, even just writing down things you want. So because we host retreats and events and we train people in certifications, because of that, I'm always going to events myself, right? I'm always pushing myself a little bit more out of my comfort zone. And in a lot of these events, there will be a process of writing down this big, scary goals that you want. And so I have, over the last 5 years, written things down that when I wrote them down, Angelica, I was like, there's no way. Like, I'm just going to write it. I wanted a lake house. I just put it on the board. I had no plans. I wasn't like saving towards it. It was just like, yeah, someday I want that. And I have that lake house right now. Like it, and it did show up in the most magical way, in the timing and the place, in a way that the real estate agents like, this is boutique industry. These don't even go on sale. They stay in families for years. Like it just lined up. And so now I am like a fully converted. I'm like, okay, I'll write down everything and anything. Who
Yeah.
knows?
I love that so much because I find I work with a lot of intuitives and they really resist writing down goals, and they feel like it really blocks them and their freedom and it stifles their intuition, which is using that rhetoric is needs to be a reframe, right? Because this actually just communicates to the universe what you're open for and what you're working towards. Like you said, it's mainly the energy behind it. Like, okay, what do you really want with that lake house? Is it freedom? Is it security, adventure, whatever it is? It's just putting it out there, and yeah, you can surrender to it. It's like for my highest and greatest good, whatever this is going to turn into. But there is the reason why the true resistance is not because they feel like it's going against their intuition. It's because they're afraid that they're not going to actually make that happen, and they can't deal with the inner critic and the blame and the shame that comes when they don't get it within that time lane or whatever what they thought it was.
That's so good. It's almost like the more we get into this kind of work, or the more intuitive you are, we can even get really good at tricking ourselves.
Oh yeah.
Right? We're like, oh no, this is a process. I'm doing this because my intuition says I shouldn't be online that much. And sometimes true. And sometimes Alex and I have had to check ourselves like, no, that's just fear. That's fear of getting
Yes.
big. That's fear of
Mm-hmm.
rejection. That's right. And there's just always this balance of which one is it?
Yeah.
And it's every single time of stepping into that, every single decision stepping into that.
Yeah.
And the lake house example, I think if I had put that down on the board in and thinking of like a now I have to write out a plan to get that would have put me into total fear and overwhelm, and the numbers wouldn't have lined up. So the only reason I really was able to do that was because I had dropped any meaning around whether I hit it or haven't. It
Right.
it just doesn't mean anything to me. So if I am, and like you said, what is it really about? It's about freedom. It's about connection, because there I would be there with my family. So I now was able to say, okay, I did a visualization every day for a year where I am stepping into feeling this freedom and connection.
Mm.
So I just already had the feeling. I was just already there. It wouldn't really have even mattered if I got it, which is
Yes.
why writing it down allowed me to even go into what is it that I want from this? Because
Yes.
maybe in the process of writing down a big goal, you realize, oh, wait, I already have that now. Do I really want that? Or whatever. It kind of starts to the process of really digging into why do we want these things we say we want?
Right. And really knowing what our needs and wants are. I love doing this in the form of food just because I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner. And I think a relationship with food is such a mirror for a relationship to ourself. And I can notice, okay, do I want that chocolate cupcake? And then after I eat it, I'm like, why didn't that feel satisfying as it normally would have in another scenario? And it's really understanding the need and the want that I underneath it all. I wanted nourishment. I wanted to feel grounded, and I was only going to get that if I did something else that was actually going to be a little bit deeper than just what that is. Sometimes it for sure is like the chocolate cupcake or whatever it is, but understanding, I think, at the core of it what the needs and wants are is so huge. And something that I'm actually also super interested in is really seeing, for those who have businesses that are heart centered that they create, how there is such a divine connection between your body and your business. And I guess it's kind of like that Buddhist proverb, how you do one thing is how you do everything. I've been really fascinated
Hey,
asking
Jim, on an interview.
I've
Sorry.
been, oh, you're good. I've been really fascinated with asking entrepreneurs how you find that mirror of how your body is the same as your business. And so, yeah, I just would love to hear if you reflected on that and if you've noticed anything.
Yes. Okay. So we love this because what we see when when we started in business, we were working on the physical body. So we were in the functional medicine space. We were running hormone labs and brain chemistry labs and really focused on the physical body. And over time, that has shifted a lot because as women we worked with got their health back, like their physical body health back, then now they're in a place where they were saying, well, okay, I was so involved, like everything was focused on my body. I hadn't even had time to think about what I would do when I had my health, right? Because it can become a full-time thing, a full-time job, and they'll get their health back and now start to be able to dream bigger, like we were saying, start to be like, oh, well, maybe I'll go back to school now, or maybe I'll start that business now, or write that book, or start the podcast, or whatever it is. And the expansion that would happen, that having the safety in the body, right, would allow for expansion then to go into business. Although at the same time, we've seen it work the other way around, where people step into the business role and their physical health is still not totally right where they want it. But the fact of putting themselves into growth situations, uncomfortable situations, will then lead to clearing some of the beliefs and the things that were holding them back in their health, because they're getting it mirrored through
Mm-hmm.
business, like business and health and kids, right? It mirrors everything to you. So you start to see like, oh, I'm continuously getting this kind of message from a client, and
Yes,
I am not holding a boundary here.
for sure.
Oh, where else am I not holding the boundary in my life, right? So then you start to see that these things, the thing that was underneath the health concern was maybe like the fact that they didn't really feel like they were worth taking care of. And
Mm.
so then you put that mirror in business, and now it's really clear, because if you don't think you're worth taking care of your business, then you won't make any money, right? Like you'll have a very clear response. So it's almost this circle of, we've seen people improve their health as long as they're using business as the feedback versus you could use business as a way of like completely burning yourself out as well. If you just override that intuition, override your physical body, work long hours. Um, Although when people do it in a way that they are tapped into their intuition and they're using what comes up in business as a way to actually learn and grow, expand, change their beliefs, then we've seen that actually then the person's like, oh, I actually have more energy than I thought,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're able to schedule things out, so they're living into the identity of someone who has their health, because they're showing up for their business, and by showing up for their business, they're telling their body like, we're good to show up,
Mm.
and then they're living into that identity. So to me, they're essentially one and the same. you really get in touch with your body, and the same thing happens with business, and you really use the business as the mirror, and then you improve your health. So it's just a circle.
Yeah, it's so funny. I feel like I hear from a lot of healers and spiritual entrepreneurs that they get into this world from healing the physical body, and then we get called to like have the divine express itself through us however it wants to, and we realize, oh my god, I just signed up for like a whole other spiritual journey doing my business where it's like everything just comes up so loud and clear. It's funny like to laugh at, but it's just this like constant journey of it. I'm curious, what are some of the habits and identities you've wanted to step into as successful entrepreneurs?
Mm-hmm. So the success habits that we are always aiming to live into, what I see is that being successful means you have to be really secure in your own boundaries. So if we are so worried about how things will look, or um, what somebody might be thinking of us, then it's really, really hard to grow into that success. It's really, really hard to put yourself out there. It's really hard to respond in a way that's actually helpful to the client. We did a group coaching masterclass this morning for women in our mentorship who want to have their own group coaching programs. And we said, listen, it sometimes seems like you're being harsh when you're saying to the group, here's the guidelines. Like the guidelines are, you can only contact me in this way, or if you're leaving a voice message for me, it has to be under a minute, or whatever your guidelines are around communication. Sometimes when somebody is asking lots and lots of questions, like let's say they're essentially using you as Google, right? They're just like, where do I find this? Or how do I do this? Do I choose this food or this food, or whatever it is that's so specific that really it's not something you can answer. I could answer as the coach. It's really something they need to figure out. It's about their own process. So sometimes as the coach, we can fall into this trap of wanting to be the one with the answers, and wanting to say, actually, food A is much better for you because it's this time of month and it's this season and whatever. We could come up with smart answers for a lot of things. And that person has now been they have not been empowered, right? They're disempowered because they actually know exactly what to eat when, and they actually already probably knew the answer A or B. And instead, we can look for patterns, like ask them, why did you think you needed to ask this? Like, why do you think that you can't trust yourself on this? And in a very kind, loving way, right? To help bring it back to them understanding, or even, hey, what resources did you look? Did you Google this? Like, where did you look to find other resources, and what have you found so far? And in our group recently, we asked somebody to do this, to share some research that they had found about a task we were asking them to do. And she found some research, and she shared with the whole group a little video about why, essentially, like dancing. Ask everybody to post a video of themselves dancing, and she explained all this amazing research behind why potentially we would be asking people to do that. And we had other people in the group saying like, oh, okay, like now that you've shared it in that way, I'm more inspired to do it. And then we said, awesome, now tell us how it felt after you do it, right? There's the research part of it. And then there's like once you experience something that's in a structure in a group, like there's so many more layers to that. Like, did you feel very vulnerable putting your camera on and dancing in front of a group of strangers? Like, did you feel seen? Did it bring up emotion? What happened for you? And the process, that the physical response and the process and what their body went through. Because one person might have been like, oh my gosh, that was so amazing, I feel seen by everybody. And somebody else might realize like they have a memory of when their dance instructor told them their hips were too big. I don't know. And we all have like a different feedback. But so if I had given my answer as to why you're doing this, then the 10 other reasons as to why somebody else, what they could have got out of it would have been lost, because it would have been only my answer. But the downside is it's so hard for leaders to do that unless you feel really secure in what you're doing and why you're doing it, because it essentially looks like you're saying, I don't know, you tell me.
For sure. I really think it comes for a lot of healers, it comes down to that belief of I'm the fixer, I'm the one who has all the solutions, and they've been this kind of like hyper independent or hyper vigilant person in the relationship, but they're used to solving all the problems, and that gives them that validation. And it's such a defining point when the healer can really step away from that and realize that they're in their power. I had this moment with a client the other day where she was like, yeah, like, my I have this thing, but like I kind of get codependent relationships with my clients, right? They like really need me and they're like, I've had to build some boundaries around it. And I was like, let's get to the core of that belief. Like she's like, well, I'm worried about, giving away too much to them or asking them more questions because why would they be paying me for what I'm doing? And it's such a shift of, exactly. Like they are coming to you for you and being in your energy and also getting to empower themselves so they can start sourcing their power from within. And it's that little flex of a muscle that they do, like you were saying, on these little different
Mm.
ways that add up to I'm basically detaching from codependent relationships to whatever toxic culture, whatever addictive substances and behaviors that I'm in that constantly tells me to outsource my power. But wow, like when women remember that divine feminine intuition that they have within them, it is so indestructible. That's why everyone tries to dim it all the time because it's so powerful that what would happen to the world if we did?
Oh, that's an amazing way of putting it. It's so, so, so powerful. And then when we combine that with the having the safety of like a structure, divine masculine, then it becomes quite the unstoppable combination right there.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, this has been so much wisdom packed, and I'm so grateful to have you on, Megan. I loved all of your shares and what you're doing, you and Dr. Alex, with working with women and empowering them to source their power from within. It's incredible. And do you have any offerings right now that you like to share with our community?
So right now we are in between programs. So our podcast, the Zesty podcast, is the best place to find us, where we're sharing all the latest and greatest. Dr. Alex is about to do a 24-part series on masculine and feminine. So
Oh, I love
yeah.
that.
Yeah. Always new things coming up for actual practitioners. If you're a health coach, functional medicine nutritionist, doctors, we've had all sorts of different practitioners. We do 7-day week long certification training, so those are going all the time. Just reach out to us, we're happy to talk to you about that.
I love that so much. And just to kind of end on a little bit of a light note, I'd love to hear what are some things that are bringing you joy and pleasure right now?
Hmm. Well, the dance. The
Oh,
dance
I
is
love
bringing me
that.
joy and pleasure right now. So my kids and I love to just put on music and rock out and dance and just get into our bodies. It was a
Mm,
really cool realization I had just recently. I went to a 40th birthday party for a weekend long with friends that were actually friends from high school. And I don't drink alcohol anymore, and everybody else still does. And I stayed up till 2, 3 in the morning, just 100% sober, just dancing my buns off. And I had a blast. And I realized that I always used to think that being that free required alcohol, to be honest. And so it was such a cool thing to realize that I was like, oh, this is representing like confidence of me and in my body,
mm.
that I do not care. And I am having such a good time. So after that weekend, I just really got connected back to just dancing for fun.
Oh my God, I love that so much. I grew up as a dancer and I love dancing too. And I had the same experience like when I stopped drinking alcohol and I was like, but why can't I still have fun and do all the things that the reason
Right?
why I did to like give me permission to have fun? Like I freaking love staying up late, listening to disco music and dancing my butt off and people are like, "You're sober. This is crazy." I'm like, "It's not that crazy actually."
That's what everyone said to me too. They're like, you're still hanging in sober? I was like, yeah, as it turns out, it's fun and possible. Who knew?
Oh, I love that so much and I love that you get your kids involved. Well, thank you so much, Megan, for being on here. I'll link all of that in the show notes. And yes, I can attest to the Zesty Ginger podcast. I love it. And you also have like shorter episodes too. So it's like really bite sized and digestible. And yeah, I'll have it all linked. And thank you again for coming
Awesome.
on.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Bye, everyone. See you next time.